Atop my head and messing up my hair is a cocked hat as worn by the British Army in the American War of Independence. Now, what do it and my 1942 Wolseley Sun Helmet have in common? Well, you see, they're both made out of felt. Who would have guessed? So in my previous video where I unboxed a Wolseley Sun Helmet, I had touched on the fact that some Wolseleys, like this one here, were actually made out of felt rather than cork. So I decided that it might be fun to take a little bit of a closer look at the felted Wolseleys, so that's what we'll be doing today. But before we do that, we have to talk about today's sponsor. So today's video was generously sponsored by First Under Heaven, a alternate history novel written by Mr. M.A. Amrou. The novel is set in an alternate timeline where everyone's favorite baddie, Germany, has won the Second World War, and there's also an involvement of an ancient human race. If you're into alternate history mechs and a jolly good adventure, I implore you to check out their Kickstarter below and supporting them. There are also opportunities to win prizes for every different contribution tier. The Kickstarter will launch on the 20th of January. Now, depending upon when this video comes out, there should be a few days before that, so you can still go check it out and click the little notification thing so you can be notified the minute that it launches. What I do really like about this book is the overall cover design of it, because it really, I think, is reminiscent of the essence of the early 20th century. It really has that early 20th century style, or as we might call it today, vibe. So do check it out. The link will be below. So anyway, let's get back to the video on Wolseleys. Alright, so felted Wolseleys, what are they? Well, simply, they are Wolseley sun helmets that are made out of felt. Now, like any other felt hat, whether it's this cocked hat that's on my head currently, a Wolseley, or any other felted hat, there's a piece of felt, and it is basically pressed into the shape that you'd like it to be. In this case, a Wolseley sun helmet. It's really that simple. It's very much similar to how steel helmets are made, where you have a sheet of steel and they are pressed. It's very much a similar process. During the Second World War, Great Britain started to make Wolseleys out of felt for wartime economy. Now, the biggest reasons for this is that making a felted hat is significantly cheaper, and regular Wolseleys being made out of cork, there was a shortage of cork. So for Great Britain, they had a big hatting industry, so why not just make a Wolseley out of felt? It's cheap, simple, we have the technology, so why not? Now, felt hats aren't anything new to the British Army, as the hat on my head is a testament to that. What really killed off felt headwear in the British Army was really the shako at the turn of the century, and then from that point forward, it was mostly leather headgear, then followed by, for at least foreign service, things like pith helmets, mostly cork helmets though, and so felt helmets really never came back after that. But as you can see, they did eventually return to service with this Wolseley helmet here. While it might not be as durable as, say, something like steel, it's still durable enough for military service. Though, to be fair, cork really isn't probably as durable either, so it's not like you're at a huge disadvantage. I would say in the long run, that's probably going to be a little bit better because it's a little more tolerant of moisture, whereas felt is not. But if you do take good care of a felted hat, you should get nice longevity out of it. So yes, these are more prone to warping and things like that, but I don't think it's a total death sentence. Again, that's my opinion. That's not any historical thing. That's just from wearing a felt hat. Quite often, actually. Like any military equipment, as long as you're taking care of it, it should last you a decent amount of time. Now, if you want to see how badly these things can warp, you can search all over the internet, or just on eBay rather, and you can see all the felted Wolseleys that are like, woo, woo, woo. So that's probably the biggest testament of don't get your, felted Wolseley soaking wet. But as long as you're not getting it soaking wet, you're probably going to be fine. Now, economy type helmets aren't really anything new to the British Army. Well, at least with Wolseley helmets. During the First World War, there were cork shortages as well. And so Britain's response to that was, let's use straw. Now what I have here is an 18th century woman's hat blank that is made out of straw. Now it is of course not a Wolseley Sun Helmet, but it's the easiest way to kind of show how a straw hat is constructed. Now the way a straw hat is made is that it's a long piece of straw braid that is then kind of wrapped, and then sewn into the shape that it needs to be. Now, it was effective and you could make a Wolseley Sun Helmet out of it, but it was found that it was very labor intensive, so it was not then repeated in the Second World War, probably because of that reason entirely, is that it's just very labor intensive, whereas say something like felt is significantly easier to make. It's just boom and then done. It's very much in the way of industrialization, whereas a straw hat is of course much more like an artisan object. It needs to be made entirely by hand, and there's not a real good way to automate it. That being said, the straw Wolsleys did perform pretty well in the field and were durable enough for military service. But they obviously were not durable enough for living 100 years or so, because there only seems to be 2 straw Wolsleys that actually still exist. So they were durable enough to be in the sand of Mesopotamia, but they weren't durable enough to last 100 years. So to us, it probably, we're saddened, but for the soldiers out in the field, doesn't matter. It works just fine. So, can't win them all. So now that we've talked a little bit about the history of felted Wolsleys and economy Wolsleys, why don't we get the cork Wolseley and take a look at how they differ ever so slightly. It's not a lot, but there are a few differences. So externally, how do they compare? They are both covered in khaki drill material, pretty standard for the helmet. Again, the same because they're both Wolsleys. Now for the puggarees, they both are the same. For the felted Wolsleys, though, they were only made in about 41 and later. So the smaller puggarees, because of the economy, they were smaller, were on the helmets. So still, a lot of the cork Wolsleys you see, of course, will have the giant, beautiful, big puggarees. But this one does not, because this is also a late production helmet from 1942. This is the last year of cork production right here. But again, it also has the economy puggaree on it. They, of course, both have the finial on top, which you can technically unscrew and you can put a spike or something like that. Very Victorian. But this one, it screws into a little metal circular thing, which I'll put in right here. And so that's where it unscrews from. This one, though, does not have that little circular whatever thing that I can't remember right this second. It actually has this little tab system that this screws into, because this is a little less strong than the cork is, so it couldn't really hold the designed metal finial screw-in bit. Great English today. So that's one of the differences between the two. This was actually a feature also on the straw Wolsleys in the First World War, so that's already kind of a similarity that all the economy helmets seem to have. Of course, the strap here, this one's missing a strap. I actually have a reproduction strap that I need to put on this, but I have not yet. So now why don't we look inside the helmets? So we are now inside of the helmets here. As you can see on the interior of the helmets, you have the securing for the strap. This here actually has the strap on it. So that's exactly the same. Now, this here is the cork is covered with a green fabric. Now, this having no cork to cover, the felt is just dyed green. So that's probably the biggest difference when you look inside of the cork helmet versus the felt helmet. Now, deep inside of the helmet, both have the Second World War metal foil liner right there and right here. This one is in significantly worse shape than this one is, but they both have that. They also have the leather headband here that goes onto your head. Again, the same, because they're basically just the same helmet. Biggest difference is the shell is just made out of something else. But that's them inside. Pretty standard. Now, shape-wise, they are pretty much, again, the same. There are little differences. probably that stem from the differences of manufacturing of a cork helmet versus a felt helmet, but for all intents and purposes, they are damn close. Now, the biggest thing, though, you'll notice with my felted Wolseley is that instead of, having a more flat back, the back of it actually comes down and then kind of goes up a little bit. Now, the reason for this is it's the felted Wolseley part. So let me just move this one out of the way. So when you set the Wolseley down on a table and not have it on a fake artificial foam head like I have, it puts pressure on the front point and on the back. So over time, if this is left sitting here, it's going to want to push up. And that's what I suspect has happened here on my Wolseley. It sat somewhere on a flat surface for a long time, and now it's going whoop. But besides that, it's in jolly good shape. I have no complaints with it. In certain places, the felt has chipped off a little bit, but besides that, I think it's in really good shape. I have that opinion because I've seen some of the ones on eBay, and they're total garbage. They're just woo. Now, there is one more thing where the felted Wolsleys do differ from the cork Wolsleys, and that is the thickness. So this being cork, it's a little bit thicker than the felted Wolsleys, but still it's quite a bit thinner than a reproduction helmet. Actually, let's get a reproduction helmet. All right, I am back with a reproduction colonial style pith helmet thing. Now, if we take a look at the cork on this reproduction colonial one from Soldier of Fortune, which has the same cork thickness as the reproduction Wolseley Sun helmets, this is significantly thicker than the original Wolseley by quite a margin. I actually don't have the measurement on me, but I will compare the two right here. All right, now we don't need this anymore, so we'll just get that out of here. All right, so back to the felt Wolseley. The felt Wolseley, being a felted hat, is relatively thin, but still not too bad. But it still looks really good. In a way, I actually kind of really like the felted Wolseley because it has a really thin line on it, and it gives it this really light and airy feeling. That's just my personal opinion on design. That has nothing to do with history. But that is definitely a big thing, a big difference between the two. But again, not too bad. And when you compare it to a reproduction one, these are in a class of their own. And I think that's what really makes the reproduction Wolsleys a little worse than they might normally be, is because they use such a thick cork. They get really boaty, and they kind of have this more gargantuan look to them because they don't have these kind of sweeping lines due to their cork thickness. Like this one here, of course, being felt and being thin, has a really sweeping line to it. But this cork one, it still has that nice sweeping line that you see on Wolsleys because it's just not thick. It's really that simple. So Soldier of Fortune, or whoever sells those reproduction Wolsleys, if you can just use a thicker cork, you can make your Wolsleys significantly better, in my opinion. And another thing I like about the felt Wolsleys is that, at least for World War I, it's kind of cool having a Wolseley that is this thin because it's kind of reminiscent of the straw Wolsleys. So that's kind of why I also like these ones. What would be really cool, though, is if someone actually made a reproduction of the straw Wolsleys. I would be the first in line to buy one of those. And then probably next in line would be my friend Josh. He would also be in line for one of those. But aside from that, this is basically how a felt Wolseley compares to a cork Wolseley. Slight differences, but I would argue not enough to totally discount a felt Wolseley because they're really cool. I've loved my felt Wolseley. I just probably would not take it out in the rain with me. Now, if you're really into Wolseley Sun Helmets, there is one resource that you should most certainly have, and it's where I've done a lot of the reading on Wolsleys, and it's this great big book of Wolseley here, the Wolseley Helmet in Pictures from Omdurman to El Alamein. This is probably the best and only source I would ever say to go to when you're looking into Wolseley's. I mean, there's not really a whole lot of other sources, but besides that, this is the best thing on the planet. It's got great photos. It's got great write-ups. It's everything you ever needed and wanted to know about the Wolseley. And has great examples from the two authors' collections. So I would highly recommend this if you like anything that is remotely on the British Empire and tropical regions, because this is not just about helmets, it's about everything that goes on in those stations. Because the reality is that these helmets were used in basically every station except Great Britain. Even Canada used Wolseley's. Canada actually still uses Wolseley's. So I highly recommend this book. So I hope this video was somewhat informative to you all, and thank you again to First Under Heaven for sponsoring this video. I can't wait to see the book when it comes out. I'm actually quite looking forward to it. So now that this video is complete, there's only one thing left to do. Take off this damn cocked hat. Having been doing mostly 20th century stuff lately, I have not been quite attentive to a cocked hat, and I much prefer the 20th century hardware. And on that note, everybody, cheers.
It's the soldiers of the King, my lads, who'll be my lads, who'll sing my lads, in the fight for England's glory, lads, of its worldwide glory, let us sing.